Spencer.
And I'm Amanda.
And this is the Literary Grapevine. If you're under 18 or saw us grow up, this podcast is not for y'all.
But for our conversation today, Spencer and I have not discussed the book, the wine, or a taste of the wine, so this is all real-time reactions.
Yes, and there are a lot of thoughts on this book, which is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. I don't know if I said her last name right, but it was a great book. We're going to get to it, but let's start with our wine first.
And Spencer doesn't know this yet, but because I've been sick and I've been on so much medicine, I'm not allowed to drink wine. So it's just going to be me watching Spencer drink wine while I drink water.
Good. I love that it's in a wine glass.
I know, I stayed on brand. So Spencer, what are we drinking?
For tea tonight. All right. So the wine for this week is the Chateau of Saint Michel. It's I was going to pick a California wine, but then I must have forgot because this wine is from Washington State in Columbia Valley. It's a 2021 wine and it's a Pinot Gris. So before I talk about why I chose this wine specifically, there's a little bit of a difference between Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris that I didn't know originally that I wanted to talk about. So they're essentially from the same, not essentially, they are from the same grape, but Grigio and Gris, it just depends on where they are, what country they were the grapes were grown in. And so France says Gris because that's gray in French, and the wine is like the grape is a little bit of a gray tint to it. It's a white wine, so it has a white grape, but it looks a little gray. It's really pretty if you want to look at it. And then in Italy, gray in Italian means Grigio. So that just really depends on where you're getting your wine and what region the grapes were grown in for the Grigio and the Gris. So this one, it falls between an Italian Pinot Grigio and a Pinot Gris. And so that's just saying that it's, a Italian Pinot Gris is generally really light. And then a Pinot Gris that was from, I forget where they said it was from, is a little bit of a drier wine. This one's in the middle. So it's a dry, semi-sweet wine that has some hints of pear and fig flavors with a little bit of spice. And that's why I chose this wine, because I think, I haven't had it before, so this is what, after reading up on this wine, that I think is that it's pretty sweet for a Pinot Grigio, but a Pinot Grigio at its core is still pretty dry. And so there are light and sweet, elements to it, but there's a spice to it as well. And I felt like that really encompassed this book because there's a lot of, if you look at all of the reviews without reading spoilers, it's like, this is witty and fun and great. And to me, that speaks a white wine. Now, my feelings on the book, what we'll get to, but there's actually elements of it that not spice in the sense of like a romance spice, but spice in the sense of like, oh, that was a little bit of a darker moment that you don't see in those reviews. And so I'm hoping that this wine has that as well, of showing some elements of that. So yeah, let me try it. Amanda, drinking for two. So
I'm so excited to see what you think of it. Give it a heavy pour and just know that I am envious. If we recorded this one day later, I would be able to, but I'm a rule follower in case you all haven't picked up on that yet.
I'm really proud of you because I wouldn't have done that. I would have just drank the wine, which is
I gotta do what I gotta do.
Yeah. Okay. So I really like this one. I think Amanda, you would like it too. It's definitely pretty dry, but it is sweet.
Okay.
We're not talking Riesling or, anything that's sugar basically, but it is pretty dry with a little bit of sweet, and it's very fruity, but not like the strawberry blush wine we had, which tasted like,
juice.
This one is definitely very much a wine. Just you can taste those flavors in it.
I love that you are learning about wine outside of our conversations, and I am learning wine from you.
Well, I just learned about this from the internet about like 30 minutes ago.
So. I was super impressed. Well, I was like sitting here and I was like, why do I have a pen? Why am I taking notes? What's going on here? But I'm fascinated by what I learned today with your wines. So thank you, Spencer. Out of a 5-star rating, what would you give it?
I'd probably give it a 4. I think it's good. And I'm a sucker for white wines. I definitely like white wines more than I like my red wines. So I'd put it as a 4 for its affordability, its taste, and kind of pairing with the book. But yeah, I like it. So I'd probably give it a 4, 4 out of 5.
Close enough. It was on the West Coast, so that's California-ish.
It was pretty close. So, or I mean, yeah, it wasn't a different country, so we're good.
Hi, baby.
This is no name. He's just spilled my wine everywhere.
And we're back, everyone. So, Spencer, let's talk about this book because you said that you had a lot of thoughts and feelings on it, and I am so curious as to what those thoughts and feelings are. So please kick us off.
Okay, so without spoilers, my first thing was that looking at the back of this book and the cover and everything it says is like witty, charming, um, delightful, like all these really upbeat, positive, great, great descriptive words that this book had me sobbing. I cried for hours. And I was also just really emotional at the time, and because I had just watched the TV show Lucifer and a character died then, so I was like, I have to stop watching TV. I'm very emotional. This is hurting me. And so I turned to this book and I'm like, thankfully this book is witty and fun and charming like everything says it is. And then no. And so I'm sobbing. And then of course Josh is like, is it like that time? And I'm like, no, everybody just keeps dying on me. And he's like, these characters aren't real, right? Like Lucifer's not real. This book's not real. And I was like, they're real to me.
That's what matters.
It is what matters. And so I really struggled with that aspect. I don't think I struggled with the book as much as I struggled with the advertising of the book. Because I think it was pitched as a way to have and it wasn't pitched necessarily rom-com-y, but it was pitched in a way of like, this is a fun take on a woman living in the 1960s trying to be taken seriously in STEM while also ending up on a cooking show. Like, it'll be a fun experience and you'll laugh, but nobody said anything about crying. And so I'm just sobbing and I'm like, I did not expect this. I wasn't prepared. Like when I read A Little Life, I went into it knowing I was going to be sad.
Right.
Like, biggest note to anybody who reads this book is that it does have serious dark moments. And I think also noting that there are trigger warnings that are needed on this book too.
Yeah.
That nobody talks about. And so not nobody, there are creators who have talked about it, but as far as publishers, as far as author, like I don't feel like they've talked about the trigger warnings that are needed to be there. Because I certainly wasn't expecting the weight of the trigger warnings.
I would agree with that. I definitely, when I picked it up, I read it on an airplane because I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun, lighthearted book based on the cover even itself. It's like like a light orange coral. Like it's a bright, happy looking book. And I did not expect to feel the way that I felt the whole time. Granted, it was a beautifully written book. I will say that. Like I was captivated. Yes, I was captivated the entire time, but I did not read it. It did not meet the expectations that had been set from what little knowledge I had of the book going into it. But I was curious because I remember last week you were like, I've avoided this book because I thought it was going to be in academia. And I did not know at all that it was going to be like cooking and going through it was not at all what I expected. So I'm curious what you thought what it really turned out to be based on what your expectations were before it.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm looking away. I'm still trying to soak up some wine that the new dog spilled, and he's licking the desk. So just so much chaos here. So I will say, as far as not wanting to read it because of academia wise, it really didn't take place that much in academia. It took place in research, in STEM, and in private research. And so I made an assumption that the book would take more time in her graduate study, but those really only like the first 2 chapters was when she was in graduate school, maybe only the first chapter. And right. So that was a pleasant surprise for me, just because I don't want to talk about grad school with anybody right now. And so so I liked that. Um, what I didn't enjoy was still seeing the parallels between what she was dealing with and like what she was encountering. I don't think, as far as, and I'm not in STEM, but as far as being in research groups and all of that, there is still definitely a bias towards women, and
Yeah.
seeing that some of those issues that she went through are still prevalent today, like gaslighting. That was a really common theme throughout the book. I
Oh,
thought
for sure.
she was everyone was gaslighting her so many times, and I still see that happen pretty frequently here. And I mean, compared to how it was in the book, it is significantly better in today's world, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. And so I enjoyed that it wasn't in academia, but also, yeah, that's a spoiler, so I won't say that next part. But I
Yeah.
almost went for it. I was like, nope, that's a spoiler. I can't say that yet.
No, I do think that it was hard. It was, like you said, it was, things have gotten better, but I wonder if part of the reason it's such a popular book is because it does resonate with a lot of women. Is like struggles that they go through in whatever spaces that they're in, especially when it comes to women in STEM. I know that for sure, but I thought that was, I wondered throughout it, because I was like, yeah, it's a great book, but it's also bringing to light a lot of issues and a lot of conversations that I think people are having internally, that we talk about, but putting a story to it and being able to say, oh, I see myself having been in that position before. I wonder if that's part of the reason it got so popular, because it is very real. Not just 1960s real, but 2020s real. What's that? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's 60 years.
Yeah.
Good God.
Wait, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 60 years. And that is what I did like about the book, is that there was such an involvement with an association with every woman in the book.
Yeah.
It was very woman empowerment focused without it being intentional, because I feel like the main character, I don't think she set out to make women feel like they could conquer the world. She just was like, this is my view, this is how I see it,
Mhm.
I can do it, you can do it. So it was very matter of fact for her, and I thought that was such a nice way to empower people, and an unintentional way of empowering people, but empowering them in a sense of, it's just it's a fact, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And I thought that was really empowering.
Yeah, and it was definitely unique in that she was like, yeah, I didn't think she felt like she needed to go out and like save the world, right? It was just like, this is right,
No.
this is wrong
Yeah,
the
here's
whole
my facts.
time.
And,
Yeah.
like, believe them or don't believe them, but this is how I'm gonna
And you
this is
could see, I could see in it why people, personality wise, aren't like drawn to her character. I could see that being the case, like as far as like the friendships and everything go, where it's like, what do you mean she's not just like warm and inviting and trying to, lightly tread into a space? Because that's what you would assume, or that's what sometimes we're even reading about, right? Is like, I need to make friends with everybody. And no, she's like, I needed to do my job. And these are the things that I needed to do my job. And she didn't ask any questions really, kind of through that process. And I admired her for that.
she exhibited more of a little bit of sometimes how I wish I could be,
Me
from
too.
of I really feel like sometimes I'm too polite or too kind, or
Yeah.
and later on I reflect, I'm like, was I not sticking up for myself enough, or was I kind of being stepped on because of
Hmm.
whatever reason? And
Hmm.
so I really liked that she was a little bit of a black and white person, and she really said what was on her mind and didn't care about the consequences, because that's what she believed was right. So I love that she had her values and her foundations like that were, um, or her values that were her foundation into her beliefs, and that remained throughout the whole book.
Gosh, I wish I could do that. I in work right now. I'm going through a professional development program, and one of my like growth goals is assertive communication. And I just took this big like assertive communication course, so to say. And I was like, I think I grew up my whole life thinking that assertive communication was being rude. Like I really did, and that is not the case at all. Like, just being able to say, hey, here's what I want, here's what I need, is not at all something to like be frowned upon. It's like a skill that people need to have. And I think a lot of my like from that was I'm just not comfortable with that yet. And it's something that I'm really having to work on. And it's tough.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just what it was that our generation. Um, okay, great. Dogs. We should name you 630.
Don't even get me started on my favorite character.
I know. We'll have to go there. But so what okay. What I will say is not to bring everything back to Taylor Swift that I can, but Taylor Swift, one of her songs says, never be so kind you forget to be clever, never be so clever you forget to be kind. And I
Ooh,
really felt that if I was going to make a playlist for this book, that's one of the songs I'd put on there, because she was very much like, no, I need to be clever. But I think it's like a reminder of like myself of, exactly what we were just talking about of
yeah.
I feel like our generation really grew up of being like, no, you need to be kind and polite, like say what you mean, but be kind about it. And that's all that's not always the best
Yeah.
a best approach, because I think especially for women, it can come off as it could be taken in a way that is negative essentially. So I love that you're focusing on assertive communication. I feel like I could really use that as a goal too.
I'll let you know how it goes. It's pretty tough, but we're working on it. I'm working on saying like no. I'm curious about your read this if and don't read this if.
Yes. So I would say read this if you want to learn more about women in the 1950s and 1960s and their viewpoints and their perspective on things, but you don't want to read nonfiction. I think this is a really good way of being able to start that discussion and then give you areas to go into nonfiction if you want to, but instead of just diving right into nonfiction, I think this is a really good way to get a different perspective. So I would read that if you want that. I wouldn't read it if you want something light and fun. I did not think this book was it, and I think it's so deceiving by the publicity and even the cover and all that. I do not think it was light and fun at all. I think it is definitely worth reading though.
Yeah, mine would probably be. I like what you said about read this if you're interested in that like time period. And I would say also if you are somebody that needs almost a like confidence boost a little bit, like if you need to see what somebody standing up for themselves looks like and need a story behind that or need to imagine that in your mind, like I really saw myself be like, oh, that's not how I would have approached it because I'm not, that way in communication. But I also was like, oh, you can live in this way. And it did make you think a lot of how maybe you could approach different situations in your life. So I would read it for that. And if you are interested in, yeah, different time periods, I think that this is a fun one for that. And then I would say, do not read this if, I really would say if you have lost somebody recently, I think that that's a really tough would be a tough read necessarily in this. It's more of a life story, I think, more than anything. So if you're looking for it for this like heart gripping rom-com witty love story, that's not going to be this. This is, like Spencer said earlier, it's a heavy, deep thought. It is thought provoking for sure book. So if you're wanting to just read to get away, to enjoy, I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, that's kind of mine.
Yeah, I think those were all really great takes. And yeah, especially if you're struggling with grief, this could be a really triggering book.
Yeah.
Um, so sexual assault, sexual trauma, that could be triggering.
Yeah.
Orphanage situations or losing parents at a young age, that could be triggering. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and none of these are, I know there's sometimes discussion on trigger warnings of whether or not they give away the book, but I do feel like these are not mentioned and talked about enough until after people read them. And I
Yeah.
do think that the book can elicit some serious emotions from those few things.
So I'm really ready to get to spoilers. I'm going to be so honest.
Yes.
We need to get there.
Yes.
And so first of all, I'm just going to say this because I think it's the most important thing to say is that 630 is my favorite character.
100%. And thank you for finishing this book before me, because I was not going to be able to move on in the book if 630 did not live.
Spencer did text me before we
That
met
was the
today.
only thing we did talk about, was I had to know if the dog died.
The whole time I was reading that dang book, that dog kept putting himself into terrible situations where I was like,
know.
you're not going to make it out alive, my friend. And
Then,
so,
and just so this is what made me sob even more, because the big point that I was crying was when Calvin died unexpectedly, like
right.
just whatever. But the guilt that 630 felt,
Oh,
him being like, it's my fault, it's my fault. I should have. The guilt that the dog felt, I was destroyed.
yeah.
Because like I was just thinking, I'm like, oh my God, it just that does this monologue run through my dogs? And like, do they get guilty? And then my mind starts going, I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I pass? What if this happens to me? What was my dog? Who's gonna tell my dogs?
Yeah. How are you going to know?
Emotionally a wreck. Just the emotional monologues that would
Oh,
go inside 630's head, and then learning about the things he would do to keep everyone safe around him because he felt this immense guilt. And I was just thinking about my dogs being like, is there stuff that they're doing to be like, no, don't do that. Let me keep you safe. Let me keep you secure.
they are.
Um, and so 630, by far the best character. Absolutely, hands down, loved him.
I could have read the whole book from the dog's point of view, but then I was like, Spencer and I both dog people. Well, Spencer also has cats, but I'm allergic to cats. I know I would love cats too, but like, there is nothing that I would not do for my dogs. I love them so much, and I believe that we don't deserve dogs, and they are the most pure souls and hearts in the world. And so when that dang dog, first of all, the fact that it was named 630 because that's the time they became a family wrecked me. And that could be my spoilers. I just love that dog. No, it was so good. It really was. And it was heartbreak. It was a heartbreaking book.
I was so destroyed. And I know things worked out in the end as far as, Elizabeth being able to go and be back in her in charge of her research and in charge of the chemistry department and all of those things. Like, it all worked out, but I just like what it took to get there, and the fact that she had to give up a lot of her dreams just because the world wouldn't let her.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like a sacrifice she was making for other people. It was she could not physically progress because the world wouldn't let her. That was it. The world was limiting. And so it just really put that in perspective of like the opportunities that like I have, now, and that I'm available to pursue, because I have that ability to do it because the world has changed, but also still thinking about the things that are challenging today.
For
So
sure. And I also like want to note too, like as we're talking about it, where she was like, so she was struggling with so many things, and then it really brought back to that like power of community though, and like another woman saying like, no, I'm gonna step in and help you here, and like how necessary that really is in life. And I think that was just like a bigger picture kind of put on it. And I know that I literally just forgot her name. What was her across the neighbor street lady?
I want to say like Harriet.
Maybe.
I don't
We're gonna
know.
go with
She's
Harriet.
my second
Loved
favorite.
her. She was my second favorite character as well. And the way that she just accepted, like, I know she had her own stuff going on, so she was happy to get out of her house. But the way that she just was like, no, I'm here for you, to help you, to take care of your child, and to take care of you. Like, that love, I think, was something that she had to learn to accept. And I just loved that character too, of her like being there and just like showing up and being like, what do you mean your kitchen's a lab? Like, okay.
Like, all right.
I
Again,
cannot.
kudos to like all the women who are watching the show and being like, yes, like I think that's just proof that, like given opportunities, people generally want to pursue them.
Yeah.
It's when you don't give them the opportunities that, it prohibits change and evolution and all those things. I think that was something else that I really loved by the end of the book, is just the community of women that came together. Because for a while there, it really felt like Elizabeth was like on her own, and everyone at the research institute was like, oh, she's just sleeping with him to get his like lab equipment or all this stuff, you know. And then by the end, especially the personnel assistant the personnel secretary
Yes.
who was a huge part in her getting fired and all of those things. And then at the end, she's the one who went and got her back and brought her to the research institute. And they were like, no, you know, you build each other up, you don't tear each other down. Like that's how we move forward as a community and as a gender of moving forward, because we can do it together. So I thought that was a really full circle moment of being like, you know, you can have disagreements and have like issues with women and then also move forward, because I think there's this assumption that women like hold grudges really bad, but I think that's just also a stereotype that gets put on women. And so I loved seeing that in the book too, of being like, no, like they all came together to move forward and progress into, you know, the 70s and beyond.
So good. Yeah, my mom told me growing up, a real queen fixes another's crown without telling the world that it was broken. And I just think that's such a powerful thing, especially like you said. I think people like putting labels on, I don't know, women a lot of times, that they're like, well, they're gossips or whatever. And it's like, but how incredible is it though when somebody like helps you become a better version of yourself and then doesn't go around saying, well, they were struggling, so I wouldn't help them. Like, no, I'm just going to let you shine. And I feel like that's something that because she was so matter of fact, she's like, that part of like people not living up to their potential, whatever it was, because they weren't given opportunities, wasn't even it wasn't a consideration, because she's like, I see that you have this. Now let's do something about it, and I'm here to help you do that. Like, these are stories we're constantly hearing. I mean, gosh, Spencer and I were talking about the Barbie movie earlier. I mean, that kind of fits in line with this book, I think, a little bit too. Very different, but a lot of the same main points.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's like a great comparison, because especially, you know, the time that this book took place, it was very much like women do this and men do that. And that's just even going into like the thought process that there's only two genders at that point. Like we're not even, you know,
we're not even
close to that question in this book.
Right.
But then the Barbie movie, very similarly, is like, this is your role, this is your role. And I don't think either, and I said this about the Barbie movie earlier, I don't think either was like this huge feminist manifesto. I think they both were like, no, we all succeed when we're all empowered.
Yeah.
And I thought the book was very much along the lines, like it definitely focused on women, but it also at the end of it was like, no, when you provide opportunities, when you provide support and you do all these things for anybody, then they'll blossom. I think I loved that, you know, the end of her story, it was a happy ending, but not because of romantic love.
Yeah.
Because I think that would have diminish some of the impact that she had in finding and reaching her goals on her own. So I think that was needed. You know, Calvin passing in the beginning was needed for the point of the book. I was still devastated by it because I thought I was reading a cute rom-com and this was not a cute rom-com. And so it was needed, but I love that wasn't her happy ending of being in love. It was being in love with her work, being in love with her found family, with her daughter, with 630, like all these things. And then the other people found love, like Walter and Harriet, they found love, and that was their happy ending, but it didn't have to be hers.
Yeah. You know? And that she had that great love at that point in her life.
And
the value that she had on, like, it was, that part was really beautiful. And I did love that wasn't how it ended for her. And I love that she became, like, I love the way that she raised her daughter. I really did. I loved it. And I can say, like, being raised by like a woman, like a strong woman that like made me believe in, you know, myself was such a cool thing. Cause I don't feel like that's always the case in a lot of like not fitting into a box. And so I appreciated that from her daughter's standpoint of how she was just like, I don't know what's wrong with my teacher. Like, this is who I did love that. And that tenacity of that little girl was so fun to read, I thought.
Yeah, Mad was great. I loved her character too. And I loved that Elizabeth started not wanting to be a mother. And I think, because I still think that's still a very strong bias in today's world of being,
Yeah.
women who come out and say like, no, I don't want kids. It's
Mm-hmm.
still taboo in a lot of ways. It's talked about a lot more now, but it's still taboo. And so I think it was cool to see that she in that day and age was like, no, I don't want to take your last name. I don't want to get married and I don't want kids. But she still was able to be a successful mom. She was still able to be there for her child, to have a successful career, do all those things. So it's not that she couldn't have done it. It's just that she also could have been okay not having a child, and that would have been okay. So I thought I appreciated that aspect of it, of saying, um, that she didn't want them, but then obviously she loved Matt so much, so there was no regrets there, but
Right.
that it would have been okay either way. I mean, I didn't take my husband's last name, and that still sometimes gets like a little bit of a shock from people. And I'm like, why? Like, he didn't get his master's degree. Like, he didn't publish his papers. Like, that's my name. And it's still a little taboo that, I
Yeah.
didn't take his last name. Um, and so her saying that back then, I think, the women who did say stuff like that back then are the ones who started paving the way, and that made it where I can just say like, no, I didn't want to. And like, I liked my name, and that was my name for the first 26 years, so I wanted to keep it.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, like, and most people would keep some of their thoughts to themselves, but Elizabeth and the Elizabeths of that time doing that is what paved the way for it to being a little more accepted today.
Yeah, and I like a huge kudos to the women of that time period. I mean, just any time period. Women are the world. But like that sort of communication we were talking about earlier, how hard it is to just stand up and say like no in spaces where it's not been said before at all. And that might have, I mean, that was kind of the case in some of her areas, I'm imagining, right? And in the things that she wanted to research, and the conversations that she was having even on television where they're like, stop talking, right? Like she was really pushing that line so much. And
Yeah.
I admire people that do that. And I was just, yeah, it was so fun to watch. And they really did. That story was written because somebody did do something like that. And women have been doing things like that in history and are still continuing to do it today. So from that standpoint, I would say it was an empowering book, but it was hard. It was hard to get through at some points because it is hard. I mean, life's hard in general.
Yeah. I will say it did have me considering taking up rowing. Maybe I won't be a rower, but it made me think that I could, and that's something.
That's
So
something.
yeah, it's I
You have to be up
when I worked
so
for other
early,
people, I
Spencer.
worked what?
You have to be
We
up
get up
so
so early.
early.
I know. I couldn't do that just for that. It would be too much. But yeah, no, it did have me for a hot minute being like, is there a sport that I could do? And I'm like, I'm really not much of a sporty person, so maybe that's not the avenue I want to go all like gung ho about, but maybe I it'll inspire me to do it in a different avenue.
I think that you and I should take like an entry, like a beginner level, some sort of sporting class just for
Yes,
fun.
I
And
think
I'm
that'd be
wanting it to be karate for some
okay.
reason.
Oh my gosh. And then, so that way, when the Fae come and take us into their realm, we'll actually know how to defend ourselves. So,
Worry
those
not.
aliens,
Worry
we're not.
not, people. So we're gonna probably have swords later. I don't know what else. Like it's gonna be pretty cool though.
I really want a sword. And I was talking to Josh, I was like, hey, like, what are the chances you would buy me a sword? And he'd be like, I mean, if that's what you want, but why? And I was like, I just read a lot of fantasy books. I feel like it might come in handy one day. He's like, do you know how to like use a sword? And I was like, not even a little bit. We could totally get into fencing. That'd be kind of cool too.
Spencer.
That'd be fun. I'm gonna look up fencing classes in Oklahoma City.
I yeah, I think that would probably be yeah, I'm so down.
I can't wait.
Are
And then
you
when we
are
start
you
to,
pretty hand-eye coordinated?
no, not at all. So I'd be terrible at it, and I have terrible reflexes. So I'm gonna be really bad at it. But
Okay.
maybe that'll help with it. like if I'm practicing, maybe I won't drop things as much because
Yeah,
I'll
I
be
feel like most people wouldn't go like, hey, I'm going to work on my hand-eye coordination, so I'm going to use a sword. But like, I think that that's fine for us.
that or juggling.
So, um, rating on 1 to 5, what do you rate this book?
I would do a 4.5 out of 5.
Okay.
So very high. I just think there's some things that I had. I can't get over the lack of trigger warnings and the publicity of how it was done. So I don't know. Like if I was rating it based off of just as a book, and if I'd gone into it in the right mentality, probably 5 stars. Like loved it, absolutely loved it. Thought it was great. I just think they did a disservice to some of the readers by how it was um, sold, basically, and so that gives me like a 4.5. But I don't think that's necessarily fair to the author. So I don't know. Probably 5. We'll just go 5. Book wise, 5. If I had a word with the publisher, I'd use my fencing skills.
Oh, that's a good rating. I was honestly gonna say a 4.5. Um, and I honestly don't know why I'm not saying a 5 because I really did love the book. It's not, like I said, I've never read a book from, or maybe I have, I just don't remember it from that time period before. It's
Yeah.
not really my time period type of book, I guess. So yeah, I really did enjoy it. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about, Spencer's going to talk about our book for next week, and I'm very excited about it.
Yes. So let me pull it up. So what we're reading is You Had Me at Hola. And I'm very, very, for growing up in Arizona, I obviously don't know how to speak Spanish. But it's by Alexis Daria, and it had a huge ratings on it, and there was a lot of people who liked it and kind of compared it to like the Kiss Quotient, and saying it had a feel of rom-coms, but also like the Spanish drama shows too. And so I'm really excited to read it. I think it'll probably be lighter than this book, but we also thought Lessons in Chemistry was going to be light. So we don't know. We just go into this with however we
have no idea.
We have no clue what we're doing with our lives. I don't, anyways. I think Amanda has a little bit of a better idea.
No, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants here, Spencer. It's fine.
But yeah, so before we sign off, Amanda, what else are you reading right now? Just a quick few things that you have.
Cool. I'm currently reading, what else am I reading? I'm reading so many books right now. I'm reading Ikigai, which is kind of about finding your purpose in life. I am reading a book about sharpening your mind. I read a lot of books about self-help, but also I just am interested in like learning. I'm a love of learning type person. Right. But then I just downloaded The Stars Are Dying. It was recommended to me. It looked really good. And then I realized I never finished the Plated Prisoner series.
I just finished those. I just finished because the 5th one's coming out soon.
I was like, what's going on with me? So I'm reading all of those right now.
That's another series. Check trigger warnings, I will say. But fantastic series.
Oh, I love it. So that's what I'm reading. What about you?
Well, my list is a lot shorter. I'm reading one book, and it's called Fairy-Dale by Veronica Lancet. It's really good. It's a really long book. I think it's like 1,000 pages on Kindle, and so it's been taking me a little bit to get through it, but it's really good. It's like a fantastical gothic horror paranormal like fantasy. I don't know. There's so many different genres and elements going into the book, but for some reason it works, and I've been so invested. The first 50, 100 pages, I was like, I don't really know what's happening, but that's what everybody said to go into this book completely blind. Don't read anything about it. And I do agree with them. I think, learning with the main character is what is great about it. Which I think is kind of similar with Plated Prisoner. Like there's so much Oren doesn't know that you learn with her. And I think that was what is good about Fairy-Dale. But yeah, so I'd recommend it. It's really good.
Okay, well I might read that then after I finish my books. I need to kind of consolidate. I know that I've got a lot going on. I've got a lot of lockers open right now. I don't know what's happening.
That's okay.
It's fine. We're gonna get it together. Hopefully.
Hopefully next week my dog won't spill my wine everywhere. But I make no promises.
Fair enough. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Cheers to my water.
Yes, water, wine. Whatever you can turn it into.
Whatever you want. It was a blast, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.